In this series of videos, I'm going to talk about everything that comes to mind about every anime that I've seen, in the order that I watched them. The idea comes from me wanting to share my opinions on things that I've watched, but also not wanting to make review videos, since I don't really have much to say beyond saying, this is good because I like this, and this isn't good because I didn't like this. So the goal of these videos is to just get all my thoughts out in one place without presenting it like a review or anything. I guess you could say that this video is more for me getting my head straight than a video worth sharing with others, but who knows, maybe someone out there is listening to my dull, monotone narration right now and will suffer with me through the many hours of content to come. So in terms of what to expect, I'm going to be talking about 10 anime in each video in the order that I watched them, with very light video editing. I'd love to just make one really long video talking about everything all at once, but then the script would never get finished, so here we are. So like many Australians my age, my intro to anime was in the early 2000s on Cartoon Network. I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblade, and anything else that happened to be on during the evening after school. Dragon Ball Z in particular was something I got really invested in and loved dearly as a kid, but at the time, I never really categorized these shows as anime per se. They were just shows that happened to be on Cartoon Network that I happened to enjoy a great deal. As I grew up, I drifted toward popular live-action shows like Doctor Who, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, and so on, and I never really sought out anime, nor really had any understanding of the differences to Western animated media. Like I imagine is the case with most people, just via mere osmosis with people throughout my school, as well as general exposure to social media and the internet, I slowly heard of the all-time popular animes like Death Note, Fullmetal Alchemist, Attack on Titan, Cowboy Bebop, and so on. However, it wasn't until the massive social media presence of One Punch Man, as well as its topping of the IMDb Top 250 TV shows, that I finally watched my first anime since I was a kid. Since then, I've seen around 40 anime, most of which tend to be the pretty popular ones, though I have delved into a few more obscure titles over the years. What's made anime so appealing to me, at least over live-action shows, is that the stories that can be told are not bound by practical constraints in the physical world, and are mainly limited by the imagination of the creators. So with this abnormally long introduction out of the way, let me talk about the first 10 anime that I watched. In terms of spoilers, I won't include any massive spoilers, but I guess we each have our own thresholds for what we consider spoilery, so keep watching at your own risk. One Punch Man follows Saitama, a hero who has become powerful enough to defeat any adversary in a single punch. We join Saitama at a point in his life where he has grown bored from his lack of any physical struggle. If you exclude anime like Dragon Ball Z and Yu-Gi-Oh! That I watched on Cartoon Network as a kid, One Punch Man is the first anime I ever watched. Why did I decide to watch it? Well, it was the highest rated TV show on IMDb for a while, so being the IMDb obsessed teenager that I was, I thought there was a good chance that it was something special. It really is a great time to look back on, and I had no idea the amount of fantastic content that was to come, both from One Punch Man and in all the anime that would follow. I was intending to watch the dub, because I had absolutely no interest in watching anything with subtitles, but the version I watched was accidentally the sub version instead, and I really couldn't be bothered seeking out the dub. But this really worked out well, because that one mistake opened me up to countless other anime that have no dub. It kind of reframed my view of anime as a product of Japanese culture that I had never been exposed to. I have a very distinct feeling when I think back to this point in time. It's hard to put into words, but it's something like, if One Punch Man is this good, then there must be so much great anime coming out of Japan that I've never even heard of. I absolutely loved watching One Punch Man. It made me look forward to going to bed every night so that I could watch a few episodes before I slept. I thought the concept of a hero that has become too strong was uniquely amazing at the time. In regard to the actual content of the show, the opening is fantastic, and I would sing along with it in my head. It's definitely one of the ones I never skip. The writing is consistently hilarious, but also quite poignant at times, with the Deep Sea King arc coming to mind. I got pretty emotionally invested in that arc, and I loved the Moomin Rider stuff toward the end. Off the top of my head, my favourite episodes were the Genos Saitama fight and the Saitama Hero Test episode, the Deep Sea King episodes, and the final few episodes with all the S-Class heroes teaming up. It reminded me of the way I felt watching the Avengers for the first time, seeing all these different powerful characters sharing screen time. I'm really eager to rewatch it with my current more experienced perspective on anime, as well as storytelling more generally. The show is also known for its outstanding animation, but back when I first watched it, I had no idea what made animation good, and I even thought art and animation were the same thing. I had no frame of reference to compare it to, so I didn't really appreciate it. However, my experience with One Punch Man isn't all perfect. I was quite disappointed in Season 2. Maybe it was because I watched it much further along in my anime journey, where I'd become a bit more selective in the things I did and didn't enjoy in an anime's production. But if I were to try to explain my problems, I guess I would describe Season 2 as having a bunch of little issues, like the weirdly edited new opening, overuse of onion skin frames, and the repetitive and uninteresting sound design, with one particular whipping sound that was used for so many different things that weren't whips. But my major gripe was the lack of anything unique or creative in the storyboarding or animation. Where Season 1 felt like it was full of passion and creativity, Season 2 fell flat and average. However, the story intrigued me enough a few episodes in to read the manga, and then the webcomic, both of which I loved dearly. So overall, One Punch Man was a really fun anime with great visuals, hilarious writing, and stellar fights. It was a really great anime to start with, and I had a great time watching it. A mysterious notebook falls from the sky, landing within view of a Japanese high school student's gaze. The human whose name is written in this note shall die, professes the notebook. Death Note follows the story of Light Yagami, a young man who takes ownership of this Death Note. Upon finishing One Punch Man, I decided to watch the anime I had heard mentioned in popular culture the next most, Death Note. The way I experienced Death Note was so different to One Punch Man. For One Punch Man, I took it slowly and would watch 1 or 2 episodes before bed, but for Death Note I would watch it constantly, before bed, during study breaks at my desk, on the bus to uni, and so on. I should also note that I watched the dub, and I absolutely loved it. If I remember correctly, before watching, I'd googled whether people recommended the sub or the dub, and people joked that the dub was worth it for the potato chip scene alone, and while this did end up being true, I really did love the dub performances of essentially all of the characters, with notable standouts being Ryuk and L. So now I'm just gonna ramble a bit about some story related stuff. I was hooked to the show right at the end of episode 2, with Light's confrontation with Lindell Taylor. It's a great example of the cleverness in Death Note's writing, where wild plans can be executed to satisfying perfection with intense music to accompany them. I also thought Light's early strategies for hiding the Death Note were really cool. Just generally, Death Note does cleverness really well, without it seeming too ridiculous or cringeworthy or anything like that. Without spoiling it, I love one particular episode that involves a certain important character's fate. It was a truly monumental episode to the story of the show as a whole, and was clearly treated with great respect and care by the creators. Even now, without having seen it in years, I distinctly remember the scenes with Misa Misa singing and the scene that takes place on the rooftop in the rain. I remember watching that episode on the bus and my jaw dropping at the end. The final arc of the series is a blur in my memory, but I absolutely adored the finale. The episode took its time to breathe and set a strong atmosphere and tone that stuck with me to this day. I absolutely loved the chime, followed by the mid-episode eye catch proclaiming, "All humans will, without exception, eventually die." From a production standpoint, I don't feel like I have too much to say. Beyond that one monumental episode I mentioned, as well as the final episode, nothing really jumps out to me that was particularly interesting about the way the show was directed or produced. But something I find pretty funny is that when I think back, I don't actually remember Death Note having any animation at all. All my memories of it are just still panels, which makes me wonder how the anime compares to the manga. A few months ago, I did actually buy the first volume in the black edition, purely because of how cool it looks with the pure black front and back cover and even the black pages. But I never actually read it, but I suppose I have to one day. But back to the anime, one thing about the production that I can say is that it has a fantastic soundtrack. It's one of the few anime where I started listening to character themes after the show finished. Even as I'm writing the script, I'm listening to L's theme B, which you should definitely go listen to, but I imagine I'll probably be using it as the background music for this section of the video, so you've already fallen into my trap without even knowing it. I also now love both of the openings for the show, but I don't think I ever watched through either of them in their entirety on my first watch through. The sheer boldness of the second opening is quite amazing, and I wish more anime would go all out with their openings like that. So overall, Death Note is a cleverly written show with great directing, fantastic performances, and memorable music. I would recommend it to anyone as a first anime to watch. Cowboy Bebop tells the story of Spike Spiegel, a spacefaring bounty hunter who was left behind his dark and dangerous past. Spike is joined by 3 others on his journeys throughout the solar system in the Bebop spaceship. Jet, a retired police officer, Faye, a wanted woman, and Ed, a child tech genius. Cowboy Bebop was something that I had vaguely heard of in the distant past and had seen on the top 250 list of TV shows of all time on IMDb. On first watch, I remember thinking that this was a very average show. I didn't understand the incredibly high rating on IMDb. Sure, there were some interesting characters, intriguing settings, and strong atmosphere, but coming off the locomotive that was Death Note's continuous and enthralling story, the standalone episodes of Cowboy Bebop were not something that resonated with me. I believe I would have appreciated it more if I had watched it a few years into my anime journey, where I learned to appreciate subtext and themes a lot more. Despite all that, I was in absolute awe when Spike fell out the window and the choir began singing. I was utterly speechless and thoroughly entertained by the episode with the decaying lobster. I was captivated by the Pierre LeFou story, which is probably still my favourite episode of the show to this day, and I cried my eyes out when Faye was watching the video that her younger self had recorded. The show was also the first time I felt something akin to post-series depression. The characters felt something akin to real people to me, and I genuinely felt sad that their stories had ended and that I wouldn't see them doing anything new ever again. Of course, having had time to reflect on the show, as well as having watched many video essays and reaction videos, I've definitely come around to understanding why Cowboy Bebop is praised as much as it is. It has memorable characters, interesting subtext, strong themes, great music, and beautiful art and animation. However, beyond a few standout episodes, the series as a whole really wasn't and isn't the anime for me. Due to the death of their mother, two young boys try to use alchemy in a way that it never should be used, and they pay the price. Their search to rectify their mistake leads them into the center of a dark web of conspiracy that threatens the entire world as they know it. Yet another anime I had heard rumblings of as I was growing up, and another that was highly rated on IMDb. It was the longest anime I had watched thus far, with almost double the episode count of the next longest, which was Death Note. I heard on Reddit that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was like Avatar but for grown-ups, and I was sold. But looking back, this was definitely a very poor comparison, as the two shows are only very vaguely related in their somewhat similar power systems. I was intrigued by the first few episodes, with the Nina episode truly sucking me into the show. I appreciated that the show was not afraid to tackle dark ideas that early on. I binged the rest of the show very quickly as I came down with a bad cold, and hence I had nothing better to do with my time. I don't really have any deep thematic analysis of the show or anything, as I just went along for the journey, like I did for all shows back then. I liked Mustang because he was cool, the Führer because he was a great fighter, Armstrong because he was hilarious, and Father because he was intriguing. I liked the show's balance of action, mystery, and emotion. Some story highlights were the Nina episode, Mustang vs. Lust, the Ishval and flashback episode, Hohenheim's backstory, and the entire final arc. When I think back to the show, these are the moments that come to me. Speaking more on the final Promise Day arc, I think this still ranks in the top 10 of the best arcs across all the anime I've seen. I loved the big build-up and the multiple distinct but converging storylines that were going on. However, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, to me, was not as good as many people say it is, for instance being the top-rated show on the MyAnimeList website at the time of writing. It was a fun show, but it didn't strike some big emotional punch to my soul or anything. The story, characters, animation, and music were all great and memorable, but they were nothing exceptionally extraordinary, and certainly not the pinnacle of the great mountain that is the entirety of all anime ever produced. The show just didn't reach me on such a profound level compared to some later entries in my anime collection. However, one aspect of the show that truly lives up to its reputation is the show's first opening called Again. This is an absolutely brilliant opening and easily ranks in the top 10 of all the anime OPs I've seen so far. From a visual perspective, I love the way the first 5 seconds tell a short story that is only understood when more context is provided much later into the show. The other 4 OPs don't come anywhere close to OP1, but they are definitely very memorable, with OP5 being the best of the bunch. And by the way, the version I watched was the dub. It was great, as almost all dubs tend to be in my eyes. Memorable performances are Hohenheim, Father, Alphonse, and Mustang. So looking back, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was a great show. The characters were very memorable, the fights were pretty interesting, and the final arc was great. It also wasn't afraid to tackle dark ideas, which is something I always love. Eren Yeager lives a peaceful life within the boundaries of enormous walls that keep out giant humanoid creatures called Titans. He has a deep-seated desire within him to leave these walls in a bid to reclaim the world and help humanity be free. Attack on Titan was perhaps the first quote-unquote new generation anime I had ever heard of, as I had 2 friends who were watching it back in 2013. 4 years later, having already crossed off the big IMDb high-scoring anime, I decided to give it a try. I love Attack on Titan. Of all the anime I've seen so far, it is truly the one within which fandom I am most deeply entrenched in. My phone's wallpaper is Attack on Titan. I have canvases in my room of my favourite manga panels. I listen to Attack on Titan music constantly. I've watched hundreds of hours of reactions, reviews, and manga discussion videos, and I've even made videos of my own. There's some scenes I've probably watched hundreds of times. I love Attack on Titan. Season 1 was the only season that had been released when I first watched Attack on Titan. Starting off with the positives, one of my initial thoughts at the very beginning of episode 1 was that the show was so drastically more detailed in its art compared to all of the other anime I'd seen so far. I still have a striking visual in my head of Shiganshina from the first episode to this day. I've also watched the first scene so many times. I love the slow reveal of the Colossal Titan in conjunction with the particular choice of OST, of which that particular arrangement is never used again in the show, at least to my knowledge, which really makes the moment special. Putting aside the stellar art, which I consider fantastic throughout the entire season, the story is split into two major parts in my head. One for the episodes up to Eren's trial, and one for all the episodes that follow. My impression of the first half of the season was quite poor. I thought it was quite repetitive and was just reiterating the same ultra-nationalist theme over and over. But looking back with the complete story now in mind, this is clearly quite intentional and is supposed to be overbearing to the viewer, especially through a retrospective view of the show with a changed perspective. There's a great video by Kyle Entertainment called Core Themes and Changing Context in Attack on Titan that I highly recommend for a deep dive into this topic. I'll leave a link in the description, though be warned it definitely contains manga spoilers. The season picks up substantially with Eren's trial and the female Titan arc. The time spent with Levi's squad was great, heartwarming, heartbreaking, and infuriating. The episode where they all bite their hands as a way of apologizing to Eren, and then Eren remembering this as he sees Petra's hand on the horse, was when I knew I loved the show. Their collision with the female Titan ignited a hatred within me that is only felt extremely rarely in some of my favourite stories, and I absolutely loved it. I also want to mention that I remember watching one episode on my phone when I was walking home from uni. The way I watched anime was so drastically different back then compared to now, where I make sure all my attention is focused on it and tend to watch it almost exclusively while in bed before going to sleep. Anyway, so I started watching season 1 at the perfect time, as season 2 began airing a few weeks after I finished. Season 2 was really what soared my love for the show. It was the first anime I'd watched week to week, and I looked forward to it and would stay up late to watch it as it came out. I think back very nostalgically to that time, as I was watching a few different things every week that I thoroughly enjoyed. Attack on Titan Season 2, Ruby Volume 4, and Star Wars Rebels Season 3. I'm really not sure why Season 2 resonated so strongly with me compared to Season 1. Perhaps it was the fact that I was waiting a week between episodes, so I had time to digest them and view discussions of them on Reddit. A few episodes into Season 2, I decided to read the manga, which was a great decision. It was the first manga I had ever read, and I was surprised at how the same emotions were able to be conveyed over such a static medium. These days, the manga is probably my favourite version of the story, but the anime is where I usually go when I want to re-experience a moment from the story. By the time I finished Season 3, Attack on Titan was cemented as one of my favourite shows ever. Season 3 Part 2 in particular was fantastic, with solid pacing and memorable episodes. A particular reveal happens in Season 3 Part 2, and the episodes that follow are perhaps the most engaging episodes of anything I've ever watched. Now with Season 4, there was a big change with a new studio taking over. Season 4 Part 1 was great. It was the first time I'd watched anime with a group of friends, and because they would only come over every second week, I ended up watching every episode at least twice, and have even seen some episodes 3 or 4 times. The story, as well as Mappa's highly detailed art, carried Season 4, though I do wish there was more Sakuga, which I absolutely loved in Seasons 1 to 3. The first episode of Season 4, as well as the Zeke backstory episode, are some of the best episodes of the entire series, and are near-perfect adaptations of the manga in my eyes. So far, Season 4 Part 2 has been fantastic, and the content yet to come is undoubtedly the best part of the manga by an absolute landslide, so I'm really looking forward to it. So simply put, Attack on Titan is a contender for my favourite story of all time. The anime is executed to near perfection, with great directing, animation, voice acting, and music. It has legendary openings and endings, some of the best fights ever, and has great aspects of mystery, sci-fi, and drama. Please watch Attack on Titan. It's really great. Mob Psycho 100 tells the story of Shigeo Kageyama, a young boy with a kind heart. Guided by a talented scammer, Shigeo makes friends and helps others be the best they can be, all while learning to express his own bottled up emotions. Mob Psycho is beautiful. It tells a surprisingly touching story with great characters, comedy, and action. Its animation is the best of all of the anime I've seen. It constantly demonstrates creativity, a clear passion, and a strong creative vision. From a production point of view, it probably tops my list. Every episode is brilliantly directed with fantastic cinematography. The show is consistently stellar in its art, with outstanding and eclectic animation styles being used throughout each episode. Fight scenes are of course great, with really cool Sakuga that demonstrates Mob's power. The show even has one fight involving teleportation that is the best portrayal I've ever seen of how threatening a power it can be. I also have to mention the mid-episode eye catches, which are phenomenal. I don't remember if this was always the case, but definitely by season 2, they are always beautifully animated in a very different art style to the show, and tell really cute short stories that occasionally tie into the content of the episode. I'd love if more anime could do clever things with their eye catches like Mob Psycho does. Aside from all that, the story of Mob Psycho 100 is really compelling. It's a very character-focused show, somewhat like a slice of life with an overarching storyline. One is a great author. He mixes comedy, emotions, and expectation subversion perfectly. He's also created two characters that I cherish deeply in Mob and Reagan, two fantastic people who have helped shape each other into better versions of themselves. And of course I couldn't talk about Mob Psycho 100 without mentioning the Body Improvement Club, who perfectly personify the will to never give up and try your hardest. They are the ultimate friends who will never unfairly judge you and will always push you to be the best you can be. There is nothing negative I can say about Mob Psycho 100. Please watch this show. I loved watching it, I love rewatching it, and I look forward to watching season 3 in the future. A boy and a girl, two total strangers, wake up in each other's bodies. Though they are not able to directly communicate with each other, a bond develops between them. Your Name was the first in a very limited list of anime movies I've seen. I don't really remember how I heard about it. It was probably on the R-Movies subreddit or something. However, I'm so glad that I did because this movie is phenomenal. It made me cry, like a lot, like uncontrollable sobbing. Up until this point, I had never been so emotionally affected by a piece of media, and I was so glad that I had been. I love it when stories can make me feel powerful emotions. Your Name is a story with a premise that sounds pretty cliche, but if you give it a chance, it really does well at exploring this premise to its full potential. The two main characters are really cute, and their relationship is really genuine and touching. The music is great. I think it might even be the best aspect of the movie. Sparkle is probably my favorite anime song ever. I have no idea what the lyrics are saying, yet it makes me tear up just listening to it and knowing the context in which it's used in the movie. But just all around, the music in the movie really heightens the emotions that are on display. The movie is deeply entrenched in Japanese culture, which is really cool. This is perhaps the one case where I would have a bias toward recommending the sub, since I feel as though it would be difficult for a dub to adapt and translate some of the subtleties that make the movie so great. However, you never know. Generally speaking, I'm a massive fan of dubs, so I'm sure they could pull it off somehow. Looking back, I find it crazy that I actually watched the first half of this movie on a bus home from uni, and then stopped watching for a few hours, and then finished the rest of it in my bed at night. It's so crazy how differently I used to watch anime only a few years ago. This is something I would never do these days. This is also one of a very limited list of anime that I'm too scared to rewatch, as I don't want to disturb the powerful memory I have of it, which I cherish dearly. So overall, Your Name is fantastic, and is one of my favorite movies of all time. If you enjoy emotionally impactful stories, I highly recommend it. Taking place in the 10 years before the final tournament epilogue of Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super expands the world known to Goku and his friends to a multiversal level. Dragon Ball Z defined my childhood, and had a large part in defining who I am as a person. Following the successful sequel to the series in Battle of Gods, and an entertaining follow-up in Resurrection of F, I was incredibly excited for Dragon Ball Super. It took all of the effort I had to wait 1.5 years after the release of the sub for the Funimation dub to finally air. Now, because a lot of my thoughts on Dragon Ball Super are plot related, I'm going to be talking a lot about plot events. So if you really want to avoid spoilers about each of the arcs and the major events in them, then skip this section of the video. So, the first few episodes were really fun and deeply emotional for me. It was crazy seeing all of these characters again, just living their lives during peacetime. But this feeling slowly faded over time as the difference in music, tone, and even personality of some of the characters became more noticeable. This isn't really a fault of the show, but rather stems from the drastic divergences that the original Funimation dub of Dragon Ball Z made from the original Japanese dub. However, when Dragon Ball Super got to the Trunks arc, it really felt like I was just watching more Dragon Ball Z, and it actually impacted me on quite an emotional level. I remember one scene with Trunks confronting the Android 18 of our timeline and just being so emotionally invested, as though these characters were like real people in my memories. Looking back at the show more generally, the arcs that retold the two movies were truly terrible. They told the same story with bland filler and unbelievably poor animation. If you ever watch Dragon Ball Super, watch the two movies and skip these episodes. I suppose I can't really say they're all bad, since I only watched a handful of them, but the ones I saw were bad enough that I'm very confident in my recommendation. But the show really starts forging its own identity in the Universe 6 tournament arc. This arc gives us new settings, new characters, and interesting fights. After getting tired of waiting for the dub to get beyond the first two movie arcs, compounded by the fact that I was increasingly noticing the divergences of the Dragon Ball Super characters from the characters I knew in the Funimation dub from when I was a kid, I just swapped to the sub. It honestly was pretty good. People always joke about the voice actor for Goku being an old lady, but I think it fits him quite well. The next arc was the Future Trunks arc. I touched on it briefly before, so to reiterate, to me this is the closest content we got to original Dragon Ball Z. The arc starts off quite strong as we follow Trunks as he attempts to escape his present. The arc is carried by mystery and character interactions, but it falls short in its ending, which is a bit rushed without much thematic intrigue or cleverness. But something I do absolutely love is the introduction of a second Omni King, a second multiversal level entity who could just destroy the entire multiverse if he felt like it, spawns into being, but the story just continues as usual as though nothing ever happened, and I love it. However, the Trunks arc also contains two retcons in Trunks' blue hair and the impermanence of Potara earring fusion that I hate with every fiber of my being and truly find insulting to me as a viewer. These are so insulting that they sour my opinion of Dragon Ball Super as a whole. We then get a few semi-amusing quote-unquote filler episodes until we get what really defines Dragon Ball Super, the 55 episode long Tournament of Power arc. The build up to this arc is pretty fun. We get to see Goku recruit warriors for the Universe 7 team that will fight in a multiversal battle royale against 7 other universes. We get some fun episodes, in particular with Master Roshi, Tien, Krillin, Gohan, and Android 17, all of whom prove themselves to Goku as well as to us the audience. Finally, we then travel to the tournament itself, where all 8 universes will fight for 48 minutes, and the last person standing will win it for their universe. So this tournament is truly a very mixed bag. On one hand, you could say it has abysmal pacing, where you have entire episodes taking place in what is supposed to be less than 1 minute of time passing. You could say it has a terrible villain in Jiren, who is a blank canvas with no character whatsoever. You could say it has many filler episodes that are uninteresting and repetitive. You could also say that it's incredibly inconsistent in the strength of characters and has unbelievable power scaling issues. You could say that with few exceptions, each episode is solely self-contained that has no ramifications or carryover for future episodes whatsoever. However, on the other hand, you could say that we get to meet and spend a lot of time with really cool, interesting, and genuinely fun to watch new characters. We get nice character moments, like Goku crying when he thinks Master Roshi has died, and Vegeta saving Kaba from being eliminated. And we get cool new transformations, fights, music, we get Kefla, we get a new OP, and just general hype, as long as you don't think too hard. The first Goku vs Jiren fight was so exciting, and the ending of the arc, which just so happens to also be the final episode of Super, is the best episode of Dragon Ball Super, and is really executed to perfection. This final arc really represented Dragon Ball Super well as a whole. It's a mess, but it's a fun mess, and due to the large community surrounding Dragon Ball Super, it was a really fun time to watch it week by week and read up on discussions all around the internet. I do want to say that a part of me would love to see a movie adaptation of the Tournament of Power arc, similar to the recent Broly movie. I would love for it to just go absolutely crazy with the Battle Royale concept with a real-world time limit of 48 minutes. There's so much potential, and I kind of wish they went this route instead, but I'm fine with what we got. But before I stop talking about Dragon Ball Super, I also want to briefly mention that Dragon Ball Super is what got me into the Dragon Ball fandom. I've loved the Dragon Ball franchise for as long as I can remember, but it was only during the airing of Dragon Ball Super that I started reading episode discussions, watching more Dragon Ball Z YouTubers, and listening to the Kanzenshu podcast, and for that, Dragon Ball Super was definitely worth it. In a superpowered society where nearly 80% of the population have unique special abilities called quirks, Izuku Midoriya is born quirkless. My Hero Academia follows his journey to reaching his goal of becoming a hero. I love My Hero Academia. It's the hypest anime I've ever seen, and it's even made me tear up at a few points. Every single episode is really entertaining, with consistently fantastic animation that's to be expected from Studio Bones. It's truly an ensemble of great characters, as is exemplified by the first opening that gives them each a brief moment in the spotlight. It also has fantastic music, with You Say Run and many of the OPs being so iconic to me. In regard to my viewing experience, I binged the first 2 seasons when I was on exchange in Canada. It was a really fun time, and I believe that the show is best experienced when binged. I should also mention that I watched the dub, and I loved it. It's one of my favourite dubs out of all the dubs I've seen. If the dub stops airing, I will stop watching the show. But looking at the show more generally, to me it's carried by its creativity in the use of quirks, which is the name for superpowers in the show. It also has fantastically animated and very emotional fights, and it does a good job of drilling in its simple yet powerful lessons of what it means to be a hero. I've always thought that the simple yet inspiring messages dispensed by the show makes this a great anime for the current generation of kids, similar to how Dragon Ball Z was for my generation. There's also really touching character moments, like Deku telling Eri, "Your quirk is a blessing," and Nana Shimura telling All Might, "Do your best." Each season has a distinct feeling or tone, and they are all executed really well in my opinion. Most arcs are fantastic, and no arcs are bad, but some arcs are significantly better than others. Particular low points are the license exam arc in Season 4, and the Class A and Class B arc in Season 5. However, every other arc is a highlight, and it's really hard to choose my favourite. I also started reading the manga when Season 5 ended, and now I'm up to date. Generally, I think it's pretty good, but I definitely prefer the anime. There's also many great openings and endings. The first few seconds of the first opening has such a distinct feeling associated with it, which I love, but I'm not knowledgeable enough about music to adequately describe it. There's also 2 movies. They're pretty fun, but not consequential at all. I actually enjoyed the second one quite a bit. It places our characters in more of a role model position, and it's pretty cool. Overall, My Hero Academia is a great watch. I find it really engaging, full of great action and creative fights, and I look back fondly on my time watching it. Gamers is a comedy about gamers. What more can I say? Boy oh boy, what an anime. I watched this right after I watched My Hero, as My Hero was the first time I'd used the Funimation streaming service and they kept promoting gamers. I don't remember very much at all about the plot of this show. There's a main character who's an epic gamer, and at his school there's other girls who are gamers, and he falls in love with one of them or something, but then one of the others falls in love with him or something. I really don't remember. The show was an absolute mess. I remember it having overly contrived relationships and constant ridiculous scenarios occurring, as well as being quite fanservice-y. However, it's not bad per se, you just have to temper your expectations going into it. I remember laughing at one of the ridiculous situations that came about because of the love triangle, though I could not for the life of me describe what the situation was 4 years later. I should also mention that Karen Tendo is such a memorable name for some reason. It's the only name and one of the only things I actually remember from this anime, so well done naming that character. On a more positive note, I absolutely love the YouTube video called Gamers Noises. I absolutely love the way the video is edited, and I always think about it when I edit my own videos, so please watch it. I'll leave a link in the description. But overall, Gamers is easily the weirdest anime I've watched. It was an absolute mess, but a somewhat fun mess occasionally. It would definitely rank near the bottom of my overall anime list, but if you've got absolutely nothing else to do, then I'd say why not just watch it. Well done, you made it to the end of the video. I'm pretty surprised anyone is actually listening to these words that I'm writing right now. If for some reason you are, please put your favorite vegetable in the comments. But anyway, eventually I'll come out with future parts for this, probably when I want to take a break from scripted analysis videos. But if for some reason you loved listening to this and you just want more, let me know in the comments, and I guarantee that the follow-up parts will be made a lot sooner than they would have been otherwise.